I had been looking forward to my 30th birthday for weeks. Turning 30 felt like a milestone, a moment to celebrate not just another year, but everything I had survived, accomplished, and loved. I had imagined laughter, a bit of indulgence, maybe a surprise or two from the people who mattered most. My husband had been acting unusually cheerful, and though I noticed it, I didn't question it at first. He seemed more attentive, more present, like he was planning something special. I trusted him as I always had, and part of me let myself sink into the excitement without overthinking the little things. The house felt charged with anticipation. I caught glimpses of decorations that weren't there the day before, small hints of something prepared in secret. Even his best friend, someone I had always trusted and considered like family, had been mysteriously available whenever I thought I might spend a quiet moment alone. I told myself these were just coincidences, that I was reading too much into the small movements and knowing smiles exchanged when I walked into the room. Still, a tiny corner of my mind stayed alert. Whispering caution in the background, I thought about previous birthdays, the mix of excitement and disappointment that had punctuated my life. Some were grand, some subdued, but all had left me hoping for more than what I received. This year felt different. I wanted it to be perfect, and I told myself that maybe, just maybe, it could be. I imagined us all gathered together, sharing laughter, stories, and small meaningful gifts. I imagined walking into a room filled with people who genuinely celebrated me, who valued my presence and my journey. I imagined being fully seen and appreciated, even for a moment. That morning I woke up feeling a curious mixture of eagerness and unease. There was no reason to be nervous. Everything appeared ordinary, and yet the energy in the house hinted at something I couldn't quite define. My husband's phone buzzed often, always guarded, always set down just before I entered the room. His best friend had dropped by to help with the arrangements, which seemed harmless enough, but their quiet exchanges, subtle smirks, and the hurried way they moved around the house made me wonder if there was more to this birthday than met the eye. Despite the faint stirrings of doubt, I chose to focus on the excitement. I reminded myself that surprises were part of life's joys, and that I had reason to expect happiness. I prepared myself for laughter, for small gifts, for the warmth of people who had always played meaningful roles in my life. Little did I know that the surprise awaiting me would shatter the assumptions I had clung to, that the trust one had taken for granted would be tested in ways I could never have anticipated. Even as I smiled, even as I imagined a perfect day, the undercurrents of tension had already begun to pull at the edges of my celebration, setting the stage for a revelation that would change everything. The day unfolded like any other at first. I woke up with a flutter of anticipation, convinced that today would finally feel like the celebration I had always imagined. Breakfast was quiet but warm, and my husband kept glancing at me with a smile that seemed just a little too practiced. He told me to relax and promised that the day held a special surprise, though he refused to give details. I laughed it off, letting myself believe in the innocence of his words, even as a small part of me whispered that something felt different this time. As the morning moved into afternoon, his best friend arrived. He greeted me with a casual cheerfulness that felt slightly rehearsed, as if he too knew more than he should. They had prepared the house, decorations in place, a small spread of food waiting in the kitchen, and yet there was an energy that didn't belong to a typical birthday celebration. The two of them exchanged quick, subtle glances and half-smiles whenever I wasn't looking. My curiosity mixed with unease, but I pushed it aside. This was supposed to be a happy day, and I was determined to enjoy it. The surprise officially began when my husband asked me to close my eyes and follow him. I trusted him completely, letting myself be led through familiar hallways, feeling a mix of excitement and a strange tightening in my chest. When I opened my eyes, the room seemed ordinary at first, just a modest birthday setup. Yet their smiles carried a peculiar intensity that I couldn't ignore. They handed me gifts wrapped neatly, and I felt warmth for a moment, thinking they had gone through effort to make me happy. But their whispers and quick exchanges behind my back didn't escape me as the afternoon stretched on. The tension beneath the celebration became impossible to dismiss. Small gestures, seemingly innocent, revealed cracks in the facade. I noticed the way they seemed to share unspoken jokes, the way their eyes would dart toward each other whenever I wasn't watching. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself it was playful, harmless. Yet the unease grew heavier with every passing minute. The surprise I had anticipated felt increasingly layered. and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a hidden meaning behind every movement and glance. By the time the initial excitement of gifts and cake had passed, my emotions were a complex tangle of gratitude and suspicion. I wanted to believe in the joy of the moment, in the love that should have been at the center of it. But the subtle clues of secrecy were undeniable, and I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about the day. Something had shifted, and the delight I had expected was now tinged with uncertainty. The celebration, the attention, the smiles, they all felt like masks, and I couldn't tell if I was being honored or deceived. My mind raced as I realized that this birthday, the milestone I had looked forward to for so long, was already taking a turn I hadn't imagined. The unease I had felt all afternoon finally demanded attention. What had seemed like playful gestures and whispered jokes now took on a sharper, more deliberate edge. I noticed a message pop up briefly on my husband's phone while he thought I wasn't looking, and even though I didn't read it, the glimpse was enough to plant suspicion in my mind. My husband and his best friend exchanged a glance that lasted too long, one that carried familiarity beyond casual friendship. A chill ran through me. Something wasn't right, and my intuition screamed that the surprise was not what it seemed, that I tried to dismiss it at first. Perhaps I was overthinking, letting anxiety overshadow celebration. But then subtle inconsistencies became impossible to ignore. The way my husband avoided certain questions, the way his friend laughed just a little too quickly when I mentioned personal memories, the way small details didn't add up, it all started to paint a picture I wasn't ready to accept. The warmth I had felt earlier now felt hollow. A performance designed to hide truths I hadn't yet uncovered. My chest tightened as I realized the birthday I had been imagining had become a theater of deception. I found myself retracing the day in my mind, recalling the moments that now felt suspicious. Why had they both been so insistent on preparing everything themselves? Why had his best friend seemed unusually familiar in his gestures toward my husband? It wasn't just small hints anymore. Patterns emerged that pointed to something deeper, something hidden behind smiles and presence. The surprise was no longer a simple gesture of love. It was a carefully orchestrated event, and I was both participant and observer, caught in a web I hadn't seen coming. The emotional impact hit me in waves. Shock, disbelief, and a creeping anger blended with profound sadness. I questioned myself. Had I ignored signs earlier in our marriage? Had I been blind to patterns that were always there? The betrayal wasn't something I had suspected lightly. It had been building, concealed under everyday routines, trust, and familiarity. The realization that I had been deceived, possibly in collusion with someone I considered family, left me numb and searching for clarity. By evening, the hidden truth weighed heavily on me. I knew that this celebration, this milestone meant to be joyous, had been manipulated. The gifts, the smiles, the laughter, all of it carried an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the man I loved with the actions I had just observed. I felt the sting of betrayal in its rawest form, compounded by the intrusion of someone who should have been trustworthy. The birthday that began with anticipation had transformed into a turning point, a moment that forced me to confront the reality of infidelity in the most unexpected and personal way. By the time the evening settled into a quiet, almost heavy stillness, I realized I could no longer ignore what had happened. The excitement and joy I had expected from my milestone birthday were gone, replaced by a sharp clarity. I didn't lash out or demand explanations immediately. Instead, I allowed myself to feel every fragment of betrayal, the disbelief, the hurt, the simmering anger. I understood that this was no ordinary disappointment. This was a fundamental breach of trust, carefully hidden behind smiles and celebrations, and it required more than an emotional reaction. I spent hours reflecting on the moments that had led to this point. Each whispered joke, each secretive glance, each small inconsistency suddenly formed a pattern. I realized how easily one could normalize small deceptions until they accumulated into something undeniable. The realization was painful, but it also sparked a sense of determination. I refused to let their actions define me or dictate my future. My value, my dignity, my sense of self could not be controlled by someone else's betrayal. The first step was reclaiming control over my own life. I decided I would confront the situation, but on my own terms. I didn't need theatrics or public drama. I wanted honesty, clarity, and above all, boundaries. I understood that healing would not come from revenge or confrontation alone. but from asserting my own worth and refusing to be diminished by their choices. The act of reclaiming personal power became more important than exposing theirs. Over the next days, I took deliberate steps to separate myself emotionally from the manipulation. I revisited my priorities, set clear boundaries with both my husband and his best friend, and focused on rebuilding trust in myself. Small victories like speaking my truth without fear, ignoring guilt imposed by others, and embracing my own independence slowly restored a sense of stability. I noticed subtle changes in my own demeanor, a steadiness in my voice, confidence in my decisions, and clarity in my thoughts. Looking back, what surprised me most was not the betrayal itself, but the realization that I could emerge stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. The birthday that should have been perfect ended up being a turning point, forcing me to confront uncomfortable truths and reclaim my life. I no longer define myself by the actions of others or the loyalty they failed to show. Instead, I define myself by the strength it took to face the truth, set boundaries, and move forward. In the end, what I gained from that day was far greater than any surprise, gift, or celebration. It was the power to honor myself above all else.